On a warm February afternoon in 2019, in a tiny village in Maharashtra, a 12-year-old boy walked home from school and vanished into a silence so dark that even his own mother pretended not to know where he'd gone. 3 days later, the forest at the edge of the village gave up a secret no one was prepared to see. A small, severed leg lying in the bushes. The last trace of a child who had seen something he was never meant to see. This is the story of Mangesh Patil from Chahardi, Jalgaon, and the night when lust, shame, and fear turned a home into a crime scene. Chahardi is the kind of village where time moves slowly, where most people know each other by name, and where a stranger walking down the road is enough to make curtains shift. Fields stretch out on either side. A cluster of houses sits packed together, and just beyond them, a line of trees marks the beginning of the scrubby forest that every child in the area grows up hearing stories about. In one of those cramped houses lived the Patil family, a poor but hard-working household, where money was short but dreams were big. 12-year-old Mangesh was the middle child, a quiet boy with dusty school shoes and a school bag almost bigger than him, who did what most rural kids do: school in the morning, chores in the evening, and a bit of cricket or playing around the lanes whenever there was time. His father, Mangesh Patil, was rarely at home. Like many men from the village, he worked away from the family, taking up daily wage labor to keep food on the table. That meant long stretches when the small house was ruled not by a father's presence, but by his absence. At the center of that house was Mangesh's mother, Geetabai Patil, a woman stuck between poverty, loneliness, and desires she could neither fully confess nor control. Over time, lines blurred between what was acceptable and what was forbidden, and she slipped into an illicit relationship with her own nephew, Samadhan Patil. Samadhan was younger, familiar, always around, and in the close quarters of that village, their meetings started as whispers and glances, then slowly turned into something more, something dangerously physical. Samadhan did not come alone into this twisted equation. With him was his friend Rajendra Patil, another young man who visited the house too often for a world where every extra footstep is noticed. While the village saw them as relatives and visitors, the reality inside those cramped walls was far more disturbing. A married woman, her nephew, and his friend entangled in a relationship that, if exposed, could destroy reputations, families, and lives. In such a world, the biggest threat is not always the police or society. It is the one innocent person inside the house who might accidentally see the truth. On February 2nd, 2019, a Saturday, school declared a half-day, and like hundreds of kids across the district, Mangesh walked home a little earlier than usual. He reached around 2 p.m., the sun still high, his uniform sticky with sweat and dust from the road. Just another ordinary day for a 7th grade student in a rural government school. To anyone watching, he was just a boy going home. What no one knew was that he was walking straight into the heart of a secret that could not afford to be seen by a child. That day, neighbors later remembered nothing unusual. No screams, no loud fight, no stranger's bike parked outside. It was the kind of normal village afternoon when buffaloes lay in the shade and women washed clothes near the hand pump, when life felt routine and predictable. But inside the Patil home, the atmosphere was very different. Doors half shut, breaths hurried, and 3 adults crossing lines they had already stepped over many times before. Somewhere in that narrow gap between what was allowed and what was forbidden, a boy's life was about to be erased. According to what emerged later in the investigation, Mangesh pushed open the door of his small house, expecting to find the usual: his mother cooking or resting, maybe a sibling fussing with something in the corner. Instead, he walked into a scene no child should ever see. His mother in a compromising position with Samadhan and Rajendra, the boundaries of family and decency shattered in a single glance. For a moment, everything must have frozen. The boy at the door, the three adults caught in the act, an entire secret world collapsing in a heartbeat. Imagine that silence, the air thick, the only sounds maybe the ceiling fan and the far-off calls of villagers outside, while inside, shame and fear collided with a 12-year-old's stunned eyes. In that split second, everyone in the room would have understood the same thing. If this boy speaks, it's over. For Geetabai, exposure meant humiliation, the end of her marriage, and being branded for life in a village that never forgets. For Samadhan and Rajendra, it meant prison, violence from villagers, and disgrace that would follow their names forever. What happened next was not planned like a clever movie plot. It was messy, desperate, and driven by panic. Rajendra, in a sudden explosion of fear, hit Mangesh hard. Reports describe a blow to the head that killed him almost instantly. In a few brutal seconds, the house that had always echoed with children's voices became a crime scene, its floor holding the weight of a lifeless small body and three adults staring at the irreversible. Now came the most chilling part. Not just the act of killing, but the cold decisions that followed. They didn't run to the neighbors or call for help, didn't pretend it was an accident at the well or on the road. Instead, they chose to erase the boy as if he had never existed. They waited, letting the usual village noise cover the strange silence inside the house, their minds already racing toward the night. That night wasn't just any night. It was near Muni Amavasya, a no-moon night that, in many parts of India, is soaked in myths about black magic, occult rituals, and secret sacrifices in forests and cremation grounds. The three killers decided to use that superstition as a shield, turning a crime of lust and fear into something that could be mistaken for a ritual killing. Under the cover of darkness, they dismembered Mangesh's body, cutting it into parts, a level of brutality that goes beyond simple panic into something deeply disturbing. Around them, the village slept, dogs occasionally barking at shadows, while a sack, carried out quietly through a back route, held the remains of a boy whose friends still thought he'd be in school on Monday. In the nearby forest, a short walk from the village, bushes shook as those remains were scattered. Here, a limb, there, bone fragments, carefully placed to look like the work of some occult practitioner performing a sacrifice on an inauspicious night. When they walked back, the crime wasn't just physical anymore. It was layered with a lie designed to mislead everyone who would come searching for the truth. Inside the house, Geetabai would later tell the world that her son simply went out and never came back. A line so brutally casual when you know that his last steps inside that home ended at her feet. The next morning, as the sun rose like it always did, the village woke up. Children went to school, men went to work, and somewhere in a quiet corner, a mother pretended to grieve a boy she had helped erase. When Mangesh didn't return home that evening, the first reaction was not panic but confusion of the usual kind. Maybe he was playing. Maybe he'd gone to a relative's place. Maybe he'd lost track of time. As night fell and there was still no sign of him, that confusion hardened into fear, and the Patil family, along with neighbors, began searching the narrow lanes, fields, and pathways that every village child knows by heart. By the next morning, the fear had turned into full-blown alarm, and a missing person complaint was lodged at Chapta City Police Station. Police teams joined villagers in combing the area, checking wells, streams, roadside ditches, and abandoned spots where a child might have been hurt or left. Chahardi, usually buzzing with routine, now throbbed with a different kind of energy. Murmurs at tea stalls, whispered theories, mothers clutching their children a little tighter. Some wondered if this was a kidnapping, others whispered about child trafficking, and a few simply said the cruel sentence every poor family fears. If something happens to a rich man's child, the police will turn the world upside down. Who will do that for a daily wage worker's son? The answer came 3 days later, on February 5th, when a group of villagers walking near the forest spotted something pale and small lying in the bushes. At first glance, they hoped it was anything else. A sack, a discarded toy, a dead animal. But the closer they got, the clearer it became that this was human, and far too small to belong to an adult. It was a severed right leg, still bearing the rough size and shape of a young boy's limb, an image so horrifying that some of those who saw it would never again walk that route alone. Police sealed off the area, called in forensic experts, and began a more systematic search of the forest, finding more bone fragments and signs that a body had been dismembered and scattered. Clothing, size, and location strongly pointed to one terrifying possibility. These remains likely belonged to missing 12-year-old Mangesh Patil. DNA samples were collected and sent to labs for confirmation. But in the hearts of the family and the village, denial was already losing ground to a grim certainty. With the remains found near Muni Amavasya, a wave of speculation rose. Was this the work of some occult group? An Agori ritual, a human sacrifice carried out in the forest under the cover of the moonless night. The timing, the method of dismemberment, the location, all of it seemed to fit the template of every horror story villagers had grown up hearing about black magic. Police, too, initially explored this angle, questioning local tantrics and occult practitioners, trying to see if there were any signs of ritual objects, symbols, or patterns at the scene. But good investigations don't stop at the first theory that sounds right. Over the next days, CCTV footage from the nearby market area was collected and examined, including cameras from a jewelry shop known as Dinesh Jewelers. On that footage, officers noticed something odd. A man dressed like a beggar, moving through the area with a suspiciously heavy bundle on the very day Mangesh disappeared. Who was this man, and what was he carrying? Sketches were made, announcements went out, and informers were quietly activated, but the real turning point came not from a camera or a sketch, but from a dog. A sniffer dog was brought into the investigation, given Mangesh's scent, and allowed to lead the way. A classic move in rural cases where technology has limits, but instincts do not. The dog, following the scent, didn't stop at a stranger's house or at the forest edge, as some expected. Instead, it kept circling back, again and again, to one place everyone thought they already knew well: the Patil home itself. This was the moment when the narrative began to shift. If the boy's last scent trail ended inside his own house, then the idea of a random occult killing in the forest started to look less convincing. Police began to watch the family more closely, paying special attention to who came and went, who seemed unusually nervous, and who had connections that didn't match the image they presented. One name kept surfacing: Samadhan Patil, the nephew who visited often, especially when Dagru was away for work. Officers noticed the timing of his visits, the way his presence around the house felt a little too frequent, and the subtle tension that seemed to pass between him and Gitabai whenever questions came up. Behind the polite answers and rehearsed grief, something wasn't sitting right anymore, and the black magic theory slowly gave way to a more unsettling question. Was this horror born not in the forest, but inside the family itself. With suspicion tightening, police turned up the pressure on the small circle around the Patil home, calling in Samadhan and his friend Rajendra for repeated questioning. At first, they stuck to the script: shock, sadness, denial, and stories of how much they loved the boy and wanted justice. But interrogations in such cases don't just rely on words. They rely on the way those words are spoken, the pauses between them, the sweat on a forehead when a specific detail is brought up. As the days passed, inconsistencies crept into their statements, small time gaps they couldn't explain, slight changes in where they claimed to be when Mangesh vanished, details about the day that didn't match the observations of others. Investigators, now confident that the answer lay closer to home than anyone wanted to admit, kept tightening the net, returning to the same questions again and again until the lies began to crack. The image of a mysterious outsider performing a ritual in the forest started to fade, replaced by the far more chilling possibility of a murder driven by lust and fear inside the boy's own house. Eventually, under sustained interrogation and psychological pressure, Samadhan broke. Once the first line was crossed and the first detail slipped out, the rest followed in a wave. The affair with Geetabai, the presence of Rajendra, the moment Mangesh walked in, the panicked blow to his head, the late-night dismemberment, the scattering of body parts to mimic black magic on Muni Amavasya. It was a confession that turned the entire case upside down, transforming the grieving mother into an accused conspirator, and the supportive nephew into a central figure in her son's murder. Geetabai and Rajendra were soon drawn into the same vortex of questioning, and the details that emerged painted an ugly picture. A woman so lost in an illicit relationship that when forced to choose between protecting her secret and protecting her child, she chose the secret. Rajendra, the outsider in this family drama, became the hand that delivered the fatal blow, and the one who helped slice a child's body into pieces to save 3 adults from shame. Together, they didn't just commit a murder. They tried to write a completely fake story over it, one of black magic, occult rituals, and mysterious killers in the forest. Arrests followed, and the same village that had once offered sympathy to the Patil family now looked at them with horror and disbelief. Neighbors who had sat beside Geetabai, consoling her as a grieving mother, now struggled to even meet her eyes as she was led away in police custody. Parents pulled their children closer, not just out of fear of strangers, but out of the newly awakened fear that danger can come from the people you trust the most. For the investigators, this case became a reminder that not every shocking crime has a mysterious outsider behind it. Sometimes, the darkest stories are written by the hands that are supposed to protect. For the village, it left a scar that would not heal easily. Every time someone walked past the Patil house or through the forest path where the remains were found, they would remember that a 12-year-old's last steps ended with his own family turning against him. Today, when this story is retold on screens and in hushed conversations, people still ask the same haunting questions. How does a mother stand by as her own child is killed? How far can lust and fear push someone? And at what point does a secret become more valuable than a life? Somewhere in Chahardi, the fields still sway, children still run along the dusty roads, and nights still fall silent over the forest. But for those who know the story of Mangesh Patil, that silence will always carry an echo. An echo of a boy who came home early from school one February afternoon and never walked out again, because the people he trusted the most decided that his eyes had seen too much to be allowed to live.